All right. So this is our last week for the moment on the Embracing Your Lutheran Identity. There's still more to go, but to make it easier for when Pastor Mark and I are alternating this summer, we're switching. We'll do a kind of like we did a couple years ago. Our Bible classes will be on Sunday school stories that are not covered in the lectionary. So like Balaam and the donkey, Zacchaeus, which is in the lectionary, but we never do because it's always end of October, so it's usually trumped by either Reformation or All Saints, so we never hear it. So some stories like that. And then come this fall, maybe we'll circle back and keep going on this. But again, we're on the empire striking back of Luther has done the Reformation, but you have all these other reformers going on too, and you have the Catholic Empire regaining strength, regaining power, trying to quash the Lutherans, almost succeeding, not quite, but all sorts of challenges coming from that. So again, and we talked about this the end of last week. So after the Peace of Augsburg in 1555, so the Catholics had conquered the Protestant areas for a bit, but then the Protestants rebelled again, and this time defeated the Catholics, and so they get what's called the Peace of Augsburg to kind of keep the Holy Roman Empire intact. And the rule is quaes regio, eius religio. I probably butchered the Latin, but it's whose realm his religion was applied. And so, which meant if the ruler's Catholic, everyone in their region was Catholic. If the ruler's Lutheran, everyone in the region was Lutheran. Reformed, it started out just you were either Catholic or Lutheran. Reformed was added as an option later on. Created political stability, so now you don't have as much of the fighting between the thing, although as we talked about with the 30 Years' War, it still ends up being a cause. But other challenges, since ordinary citizens had no say over who ruled them. So, what would it like, and again, we kind of touched on this, what would it look like if you had to join the church of your mayor? And I honestly don't remember what. Yeah, we'd probably resist, right. So.
Did people accept it? Or?
Yeah. Because this is how it was. The fact that there's Catholic, I mentioned Catholic, Lutheran, Episcopal, Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist, just in these few blocks is very weird and strange and unique in the grand span of history. There weren't as many options, especially when there's a state church. It's the state church or nothing, for the most part. And again, we're unique as a country that we don't have a state church. We haven't, because we have all these people who, escaping state churches, came here. So yeah, people had to kind of accepted it. You had people that didn't. Again, that's why Walther and the Saxons came here, because the Prussians were saying, okay, there's one state Protestant church. I don't care whether you're Lutheran or Reformed. There's just one. You figure it out. And they go, no, we believe different things. This doesn't work. So we'll come to the United States. So yeah, if we were dependent on what our ruler was, that would cause, we'd resist. It would change. We'd have some frustrations going on. So again, even if they're some sort of Christian, this would be, could be an issue for us. So again, what's the problem with this approach to Lutheran belief, or to religious belief?
Beliefs can change all the time.
Beliefs can change all the time, right? Some places you're going to have great stability, that you've got a line of princes that are going to be Lutheran, and so you're fine being Lutheran the rest of the time. It's when they start going, oh shoot, we've got to have a political alliance with this kingdom over here, and the princess is Catholic, and she ain't giving it up. Well, okay, for peace, then Lutheran prince becomes Catholic, and suddenly you've got a problem. We see that in England especially. You have the Church of England founded so Henry VIII can divorce and remarry. But then you've got some kings that lean more Protestant, some kings that lean more liturgical. You have Mary Queen of Scots, who tries to make everyone go back to being Catholic, and martyrs, archbishops who are trying to resist her, it gets to be a mess. So, yeah, lots of challenges that way. Again, created state churches that were under the authority of the ruler. What Lutheran state churches still exist today?
Germany, yes.
Germany has a state church, right?
The Scandinavian
A lot of the Scandinavian countries do. That's why, in theory, usually Sweden is considered the largest Lutheran country in the world because it's a state church, and in theory, everyone who is in Sweden is part of the state church, or is counted as part of the state church. It's when you start counting things like have they ever darkened the door of a church that then things change, and that's why you get Ethiopia and Madagascar and Tanzania and those countries having more Lutherans than Sweden does. They have a state church, not a Lutheran state church, but they still have a state church. Yeah, Charles is still, in theory, head of the Church of England. Anything else?
Okay, so with Germany as a state church, how does that affect them today?
Well, so pastors are state employees, which means in that right. So if you are a pastor in the state church, you are a government employee with all the rights and challenges that has. There are independent Lutheran churches in there. We heard a couple weeks ago, Norm's daughter and her family were here. They're stationed in Germany. They're attending a church in Germany, and he was talking some about how the independent Lutheran, the Selbstständige Evangelische Lutheраnische Kirche, so self-standing, so independent Lutheran church, which is the one that we're in fellowship with, is going through some issues and challenges, and so LCMS is actually kind of pulling back as they're making decisions that are leading them away from what we teach. But there are other independent. The Selk is the largest independent Lutheran church in Germany. There are some smaller independent ones too. But yeah, so it's state-based. So that means if the state decides how to do things, then if the state would say, okay, well, we want you to preach, or you cannot preach X, Y, Z. In fact, there's a Lutheran pastor and a Lutheran congressperson from Finland who just recently lost a suit again because 20 years ago, before anyone was talking about this, they published a pamphlet that said, or a booklet that said that the Bible says homosexuality is wrong in some sort of way. And now it wasn't, there were no laws against that then. Finland has since passed laws that say that you cannot speak against homosexuality. So these people got sued. They countersued, and it made it to the Finnish Supreme Court gave them a fine now, again, and they're debating whether they appeal to the EU court or not. But and so we had you had that problem too with in Germany in the 1930s. Well, it's one thing if the government's kind of hands off. It's another thing if you've got the Nazi government saying, "Oh, by the way, you need to have swastikas in the front of your church now, and you are not talking about the Old Testament because Jews are bad," and those sorts of things. So the state church again, and heaven forbid you speak out against the state at all in anything, Right. I mean, so that's what Bonhoeffer and some of those others did, and they got in trouble for it. Because it's one thing, in a separation of church and state, to be able to talk about the government and its policies in whatever abstract way. I mean, we've got some things where we can't talk about specific politicians, and can't endorse from the pulpit, that kind of thing. But we've got more flexibility than if I'm a state employee and if I speak out against the state, then someone's going to, withhold my paycheck or something. So, again, different. There's some benefits and some challenges either way. Yeah.
Norway, Sweden.
Yeah, Norway and Sweden have state churches too. Most of the Scandinavian churches, I think, still have a state Lutheran church. And then you have other places.
Missouri have any churches in those areas, or is it
What?
more the ELC, ALC?
There's some. There's some. I mean, again, I mean, there's a breakaway province in Finland that's not connected to the state church that's trying to not be as connected to the state church as they have been, that then are, reaching out to the International Lutheran Council. But I'm not up on the specifics of all of those. All right, we've talked about that then. So again, the fact that the state church changed when the ruler changed caused great problems, and then especially once we get to 1618 in Bohemia. Previous Catholic king was easygoing about religion, so they're Catholic, but he's well, you Protestants can worship, that's fine. New king Ferdinand, who becomes king in 1618ish, was zealous about his Catholicism. He sent representatives to Prague in order to order them not to build any more Protestant churches. In response, they were thrown out a window. Fell 70 feet but survived, so the Catholics took this as a miracle that their representatives were thrown out a window and survived. It's also fun if you look at Wikipedia, this is the third defenestration in Prague, and so they apparently like throwing people out of windows. But this ultimately is seen as the beginning of what we call the 30 Years' War, which actually lasts about 30 years, from 1618 to 1648, which was mostly religious, with Catholics wanting to bring Europe back under the authority of the Pope. So again, about 100 years after Luther starts the Reformation with the 95 Theses. Yet it wasn't purely religious. Catholic France under Cardinal Richelieu of Three Musketeers fame intervenes against Spain and the Holy Roman Empire to weaken them. So in theory, Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Holy Empire, they're both Catholics, and their rulers are related. They're both Habsburgs, are related, and so France, also Catholic, should in theory be on their side, but Richelieu wants, this 1618, you've got times where, Spain and France are busy fighting over colonies in the Americas or elsewhere, and so Richelieu wants France to get more power, Spain to lose some, so let's intervene on and help the Protestants against them.
What was the outcome of that?
Well, a lot of destruction. All right, so, can you think of other cases, whether in history or your own life, when a small action triggers a huge consequence?
The assassination of the Archduke that started.
World War I starts with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Yep.
That was a good one.
Someone paid attention in history class. Or any personal thoughts or reflections or recollections? Some little choice you didn't think much of at the time, and then.
Seems like a lot of family things
Okay.
happen when somebody says something and they don't really mean it that way, and
Yeah.
it's taken that way. And I hope so.
Yeah, so that would be one of those bad things. But yeah, there's some offhand comment in a family that then leads to separation and frustration and things. Yep. All right. All right. All right. So again, it has been said most wars are not intentional. They often start small and keep escalating. How is that true in wars, and also how is that true in conflicts between individual people?
If you don't resolve it at the core,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a big mushroom that seems to cloud
Yeah.
a lot of things.
There's a mindset where if you give in, or so you're like, oh, I've been wrong, I'll take care of, I'll wrong it back.
Right. Yeah.
Or somebody, or the opposite of, we're going to ignore it for a bit here, but it just keeps going on, and now we're going to lash out
Hmm.
in it. But
Yep.
in neither one of those necessarily, it's not resolution, it's
Yeah.
reaction.
Yep.
Dreaded, hated Manning, 9 miles away from Manila.
Right.
I don't know when it all started, but it got so that if you didn't win the football game, you might win the fight afterwards, though.
Yep.
Yep. I was not in on.
Of course not, Gary, right, of course not, right. And are they a combined school district now, though?
They are now together.
Right, yes. Yeah. What was it? I had a seminary classmate, well, I had 4 seminary classmates from Iowa, and one of whom grew up in Riceville, and apparently was responsible for them losing a football game against St. Ansgar. And, but yeah, they had trouble living it down, but then, you know, now again, they're a combined school district, so they have to in some way. All right. So again, during the war, 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648, one of the worst atrocities is the siege of Magdeburg. Magdeburg is a Lutheran city, and the Catholics end up besieging it. And after it's a city of about 25,000, and estimates are about 20,000 die over the course of the siege and the destruction of the city. And so after the siege is broken and the Catholic army sacks Magdeburg, the Pope sends Count Tilly, the general of the Catholic forces, a letter saying, "You've washed your victorious hands in the blood of sinners."
Was that praise?
Yes, that's praise. Thank you for you've washed your hands in the blood of the sinners, that those rebellious Protestants who needed to be brought under heel.
Okay.
So how is the martyrdom of Magdeburg? Because again, in theory, they could have, gone back, become Catholic and not had to worry about this, and instead they held firm to their faith and didn't. So how would that idea be horrifying and inspiring?
Well, that goes on supposedly today a lot when Muslims, Islam,
Yeah.
they're saying they're taking Christians and they're saying either recant or die,
Yep.
and a lot of them decide to die.
Yep.
Horrifying and inspiring.
Yeah.
They pretty much got wiped out. I mean, that's awful.
Very horrifying.
How long was the siege?
It was a few months, I think. I don't remember for sure off the top of my head. So,
I just can't imagine.
No.
all right. So the Protestants, though, began to win when Gustavus Adolphus intervened with the Swedish army. As someone who's half Swedish, I have to, plug him a bit. So there he is, Gustavus Adolphus, at the Battle of Brighton Field, I think.
Lutheran things are named after him.
What?
Several Lutheran things.
Yeah,
are
so a lot of
named
Lutheran things are named after him, because again, Sweden's Lutheran, so when the Swedish Lutherans come and start getting involved, the Protestants start winning. And part of it is because they use muskets more effectively than others. And one of the ways they did that is one of the ways they did it was the fighting was often in pike squares, which is good if you're trying to defend yourself against cavalry raids, and they just kind of added muskets to that, where everyone would fire their musket at once, and then they'd have to reload, and then everyone would fire their muskets again, and things like that. But one of the things Gustavus Adolphus did is, okay, we can't, technology hasn't gotten to the point where you can rapidly reload or anything. Instead, he had multiple ranks of musketeers ready to fire. So you had first rank fire, then they stepped back, then the second rank was ready to fire, and they fired, and so on. And with the idea that you get sort of a continuous thing, and so that helped those kind of innovations are part of why the Swedes were so victorious. Again, technological advances bring new benefits and new harms. What are benefits and harms of more modern weapons?
Well, in the most recent, we suffer almost zero losses personally
Right.
as attackers of Iran.
Right. You don't have to be in the same hemisphere to kill someone now, because but again, this is, and one of my seminary classmates is a chaplain for a drone group, Air Force group, and they talked about, that it's, normally, when you were involved in killing, you were deployed somewhere, you were away from home, and then you had time to kind of settle back and deal with it before you came home. Now that's your 9-to-5 job. You drive into your office, you operate a joystick, you destroy some bridges halfway around the world, or kill a terrorist or something, and then you go back and have supper with your family. And it's just, there's some different challenges mentally in terms of how do you cope with that, how do you understand that. Or, on the other hand, everyone expected Russia to just crush Ukraine, and well, so they're really good with drones, and here 3-4 years on, it's still a stalemate. So.
We still have nuclear weapons, which are both a deterrent and a horrific.
Right.
Like,
Nuclear weapons. Both
see them
deterrent and horrific. Yeah.
it's sort of that thing that just sits out there, and you're just like, I hope it always sits out there.
Yeah.
And it never happens because it's off.
Right. All right, other technological advances, and if anyone sees any of these they want to shout at me. Cars. What are the benefits and and harms of having cars?
Well, all kinds of benefits. I mean,
Yeah.
travel several states over to watch your favorite college football team.
Right.
On the way, you could be in a car crash.
Yeah.
But they've also made us dispersed. So
Right. Yeah.
one another.
We're dispersed and not as.
But you,
And they talk about the loss of community because everyone's just commutes somewhere and comes back. What is it? I've got a book on my shelf with something like 10 factors churches need to grow or something. And I got it in seminary, so it's 20 years out of date. But one of the factors is a big parking lot, which we're never going to have. I mean, I know we talk about buying the Kappa house and creating and making a parking garage sometimes, but yeah, I mean, so again, dispersed, but we can travel anywhere. And so, how about television? Any benefits and harms of television?
Well, we had the radio to begin with, so you're
Right. Okay. Yep.
or you could bring in news.
Yeah.
Now it's visual.
Yep.
When it became television, which impacts that news more if you see
Right.
something good or bad.
Yeah. I mean, well, they talk about things like being able to see what was happening in Vietnam, or being able to watch. Was it the Nixon-Kennedy debate? That once you actually see them and go, oh, wait a minute, Nixon looks really old, Kennedy looks really young. I mean, just that visual aspect that you didn't have before. Yeah. Again, benefits and harms of technology. Computers.
Information.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
A lot of information.
Yeah.
None of it sorted, or not necessarily. Yeah, that anyone can post anything on the internet, which is both good and bad. So, cell phones.
Can't live without it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I put cell phones first, and then smartphones in particular. But yeah.
So the cell phones, when all they did was call people,
Right.
you could call somebody from anywhere.
Right.
Right? So that was
Yeah.
good.
That you didn't have to wait around and Evelyn was at a swim meet in Des Moines, and Lydia and I were walking the skywalk in between her events, and there's no phone in it anymore, but there's still a phone booth.
Yeah.
That I got a picture, because you used to have this, because if you needed to call someone, you didn't have a phone line. But now you are always reachable, for good or ill. You are always reachable, potentially.
And just Friday, cruising through Story City, just before school's gonna start, young girl on a bicycle, one hand on the handlebar, the other head down, completely
We joke about that, as, with all the college students around here walking around,
crossing the street.
Crossing the street, yep.
Looking around.
Yep.
Very addictive.
Yes. Yeah, very addictive. All right.
Yeah, you go, my dermatologist the other day, probably 8 people in the room.
Yeah.
8 phones going.
Yep. None of you talking to one another.
No.
No. Why would you actually converse with someone that's in front of you face to face? No, you've got your phone.
Even 2 sets of husband and wife. They're
Right.
each on their own phone.
Yep.
And yet there's still some benefits in that.
Oh, yeah.
You think about like remote medicine.
Yep.
People who can interact over long distances that never would have been able to do that before.
Yeah.
Access to particular things.
Yep.
I mean, I feel like that is like this big and all the bad things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's some really incredible things.
Yep.
Those things do. Which clearly aren't as profitable as me. So.
Right. All right. Again, Luther, of course, uses the printing press to great effect during the Reformation. That's part of how he's able to get his message out, because not only is he printing and message getting disseminated more than the Catholic views. Often Luther's writing in German. The Catholics are still trying to debate him in Latin, and that the people aren't reading Latin. So
That time there was no accident.
no, right?
Printing press and Luther's lifespan.
Right. And so Lutherans have sometimes been the pioneers in technology. This is a Gary and Mark plug for the Lutheran Hour, right?
Well, let me add something else, because this is before your time passes.
Okay.
Gary,
Yes.
tell them about This Is the Life.
This is the life.
Oh, Mark, could you
You
explain
remember
Oh,
This Is the Life?
the old TV show, This Is the Life?
We should
This is the life of Davy and Goliath.
Oh, there it is.
There we go.
Okay, sorry about that.
Wow.
No. But yeah, so Lutheran Hour starts with, radio, using that as a thing, and then they expanded to TV. Now they do internet stuff. And some of their internet stuff hasn't caught on quite as much as they'd liked, but yeah.
They're reaching with broadcasts from 35 or so locations around the world.
Right.
They're reaching.
Yeah.
They're reaching deep into the Middle East.
Yeah, around the world,
From where they came.
on the internet, in these different language groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
End of blood. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. All right. What other ways has the church used technology well?
Oh, Davy and Goliath. I was so mad when we didn't get home in time as little kids.
Right.
We stopped somewhere
Yeah.
at the church.
Because it was on, but it was only on at that time. And if you missed it, you were done. You couldn't go back and get it off your unless you set your VHS to record it and hope the time was right. Or now your DVR or your That Dating Goliath was a kids program, yeah.
Claymation.
Claymation. Yep.
I never knew of that.
Goliath was his little dog, or big dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the dog was about as big as the kid. Yeah.
Should we bring any of that back?
There's probably YouTube. You could probably pull it up and watch a bunch of them right now.
Right.
And it'll probably be a little lame right now. It's
Yeah.
65.
It depends. There's some that are doing good things. I was thinking, looking ahead. 2 weeks is Trinity Sunday, and it's it's kind of amazing, how many people, if you say, that's modalism, Patrick, will know the Lutheran satire video about St. Patrick trying to teach the Trinity and failing because he keeps using all these bad analogies. But that's got millions of hits on YouTube and things like that. I mean, so there's some of that going on, but not necessarily quite to the extent. And part of that is that our media has become so much more fragmented. We had 4 channels. You knew people, if they were watching something, it was something on one of those 4 channels, but now, good luck.
Oh, yeah.
Well, heck, how many different streaming services do we need to be able to watch all our baseball games, Don? I mean, come on.
I just get the card.
You just hit the Cardinal one, right? Well, why would you need anything else? There we go. Yeah.
I'll try to remember. I've got a David and Goliath tie. I'll try to.
Okay. Well, there we go. Yeah.
It's kind of like, the tools are great because you can get stuff to people that you'd never be able to get to people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
one of 10, 100, million, thousand things out
Yeah.
there. So getting it
Mhm.
to somebody, it's
Yeah.
harder to get something to somebody.
Right.
Easier
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah. For years, it used to be that you could be expert because you had all the information. Now you are only an expert because you can show how to use the information, because anyone can access the information, but it's how to actually use it right.
Well, when I was I'm going to say high school, early college, and there's a Bible verse that talked about the end will come only when once everyone.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you the verse even now.
Right.
And I thought that it never happened. Well,
Right.
then missionaries started going all over, and then Africa started sending missionaries back to us because we're such a bunch of duds. But now this is the phone.
Yeah.
It's maybe that
Right.
connection that'll actually get it to everybody.
Right. Yeah. 'Cause, yeah. You couldn't build the infrastructure through Africa to do. You can't string wires through things, but you can put up a cell phone tower every so often and give people, or solar powered charger and they're good and they're good to go.
Yeah. And those in Quebec, they've all got phones. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Very remote
Yeah.
areas.
Right. For like Lutheran Bible translators will talk about how they don't, in before. So you had to create. Sometimes you had to create a written language first for this language, and then teach people how to use a written language, and then translate the Bible into this new written language, and then disseminate it. And now you can just we'll record someone reading this, and we can send out the audio file over phones and do it that way. Yeah. And if a translator gets stuck on a word, he can call up, St. Louis or Concordia or wherever and say, hey, I'm stuck on this word. What do you think we should do here? Instead of, I'm stuck on this word, let me send a letter, and few months later I might get a response. So, yeah. Again, good benefits and challenges for technology stuff. All right. Again, as we're talking about 30 Years' War, and we'll probably stop here. Luther wrote a book entitled "Whether Soldiers Too Can Be Saved." Again, if you remember, some of the other reformers become very, pacifistic groups, and this was a debate in the early church too. Whether soldiers can be saved, Luther answers the question with an emphatic yes. There are many Lutherans who serve in the military, and many Lutheran pastors serve as chaplains. Why would Lutherans tend to support military vocations?
It helps the servicemen who are serving.
Okay, so why do we have chaplains? Because there are service members serving that need spirit to be spiritually supported in their thing. Yes. Okay. Good. Anything else?
And opportunity. There's some that have, they're like anywhere else in the population that haven't heard a thing
Yeah.
about Jesus.
focus on vocation, on calling, and, you know, that part of our calling is to be able to serve, and frame that as an option that way. Good. All right, well, we'll stop here. So again, no Bible class next week, and then in 2 weeks we'll start the Sunday school lessons, deeper thing, and yeah, in 2 weeks, and first one we'll do is Balaam and the donkey. So we'll see you for that, but thank you all for coming.
Thanks.